In chapter 13, Krishna explained why is the soul stuck in this field? Why is the soul entangled in the matter? Because of the influence of the three modes. So in order to explain what the three modes are, chapter 14, he gave an analysis of the three modes of material nature. We saw in detail, as much as we could, that what is Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva? What are the three modes of nature? How do they bind? What are their symptoms, nature, characteristics? And also Krishna described how do we get liberated from this bondage. Liberation means transcending the modes. And it could be easily done by taking shelter of devotional service. And in 14.27, he also concluded saying, 26 said that if anyone transcends the three modes of material nature, they'll achieve the state of Brahma Bhuta or become situated in Brahman. And Krishna told in chapter 14, last verse, that he is beyond, or he is rather the foundation of Brahman. And because he explained that I am the source of Brahman, I am the foundation of Brahman. So here in this chapter, he is clarifying that. He is not just saying that, okay, I'm the source of Brahman, and then he moves on. He clarifies in this particular chapter 15. So builds that particular statement further by presenting Krishna as the Purushottama, the supreme person. Shows that matter, soul, even Brahman, they all exist. But the highest truth is this personal Bhagavan. And ultimate knowledge culminates in surrender to him. Because this section is Jnana, a lot of people who assume that Jnana Yoga means that they think themselves as equal to God. Through Jnana Yoga process, a lot of people approach or aspire for impersonal liberation. So the general understanding of impersonalist is that everything is a Brahman. So a certain section of impersonalists, not all impersonalists say that they are equal to God, but there are certain impersonalists called as Mayavadis. They actually call themselves that because everything is Brahman and I am Brahman, I am that God, I am that Brahman. However, it's not the case with all impersonalists. Even Swami was an impersonalist. The four Kumaras were impersonalist. Rishi was impersonalist. So many great sages were impersonalists. They never considered themselves as the supreme. They understood that the supreme exists beyond the Brahman, but I'm interested in this Brahman realization, impersonal realization. But that's very different from Mayavadi concept of considering oneself as the supreme Brahman or as God. And that is why Krishna clarifies in this chapter that knowledge culminates in surrender to the supreme person. It does not mean jnana. One understands through the jnana process that they are that Brahman, and that Brahman is everywhere, so they are that supreme. No, there is this t-shirt that we read that I was an atheist until I knew I am God. So it's not the idea of Jnana Yoga. So that's why Krishna very clearly establishes that any knowledge, especially the spiritual knowledge, it's not about any knowledge. The knowledge that is specifically described in the chapter 15 about understanding the illusory existence, understanding the presence of the spiritual world, and how to get out of this. All of this culminates in surrender to the Supreme Person. So that is the crux of the chapter 15, that after explaining in chapter 13 and 14 about all the necessary topics related to Jnana Yoga, Krishna is clarifying in chapter 15 that he is the foundation of Brahman. What does that mean? So is he not that Brahman? If he is the foundation of Brahman, then who is he? And also is the process of Jnana Yoga usually tends towards impersonal realization. However, Krishna clarifies that the purpose of Jnana or knowledge is to surrender unto him. And who is he? That is explained in this chapter 15. We'll build more on it. So the chapter 15 has 20 verses. The first section is that first 6 verses explain the illusory existence. The banyan tree analogy you might have heard many times. The first 6 verses explains that banyan tree analogy and how to cut down that banyan tree, the reflection of the tree. How to cut down, basically attain liberation. How do we attain liberation from this illusory material existence? When I say illusory, it does not mean it does not exist. It's temporary. How do we attain liberation from the temporary material existence? How do we get released from the clutches of illusion? That is explained in the first 6 verses. And then in the verses 7 to 11, what happens? What kind of bondage and transmigration happens when there is no detachment? If someone says, it's okay, I'm not very particular about liberation, I don't care, then Krishna is explaining what's the problem with that. So between verses 7 and 11, Krishna speaks about the bondage and transmigration without detachment. The absence of detachment leads to bondage and transmigration. That is explained between verses 7 and 11. And verses 12 to 15, Krishna explains how Krishna assists us in the process of liberation at all steps. How is Krishna assisting us in getting liberated? And in 16 to 18, it is a very famous section of the Bhagavad Gita. It's called as, we saw Chatushloki Gita in the chapter 10, and this is the Three Shloki Gita. These 3 verses are considered as the essence of Vedanta, because impersonalist Jnana Yoga, people always speak about Vedanta. There's also an organization, Vedanta Vision. So these are impersonal. Usually impersonalist emphasis a lot on Vedanta. That's why Srila Bhakti named Srila, because he, of course, that was later given. But he used this term Bhakti because Vedanta is not the proprietary, intellectual proprietary rights that belongs to the Jnana Yoga school. Vedanta belongs to all schools. So that's why Srila Prabhupada was given the title Bhakti, because Vedanta is not restricted to Jnana, but Bhakti Vedanta is the Bhakti is the end of all knowledge. Vedanta, the end of all Vedas, or the conclusion of all Vedas. That's what was written by Dev. He wrote Vedanta, and he wrote Srimad Bhagavatam as a commentary to that Veda, which is the conclusion of all Vedas. He wrote Bhagavatam as a commentary to that Vedanta Sutra. And that's what in these verses will be very clearly explained. What is the essence of Vedanta? Because a lot of people are confusing Vedanta as very impersonal. So that's why here he clarifies that the essence of Vedanta is clarified in this section 16 to 18. And verses 19 to 20, Krishna explains that how to approach Krishna and what is the advantage of approaching Krishna. And then also gives a lead to the following chapter. We'll see that more in detail. So the special features of this chapter 15 is that the chapter 15 describes the upside down banyan tree. The upside down banyan tree is the analogy given in this particular chapter. It's a vivid metaphor showing the perverted reflection of the spiritual reality as material existence. And what is that water in which the material existence is reflected? All of that we will see. And also, it very clearly describes what is a jiva, who is a jiva, what is the nature of the soul. This verse completely clarifies this aspect of the marginal energy, the soul, explains and clarifies that the soul is an eternal, separated part and parcel of Krishna. Means part and parcel. It's only my part and parcel. And also it's eternal, eternally individual and separate. So it is a foundational verse for Gaudiya Siddhanta, the philosophy of, and that particular verse also comes in this particular chapter. So that very essential philosophical foundation of Gaudiya Sampradaya is found in this particular chapter. And Purushottama, who is the Supreme Lord? Is Brahman the Supreme? Is the Supreme an impersonal energy? That is explained in this verse, in this chapter, that Krishna is beyond both the conditioned and the liberated souls. He is not one among the souls. He is the leader of all souls. That is why he is Purusha Uttama. The soul is also a Purusha, but in the conditioned state, it's considered itself as Purusha because it is trying to enjoy this world. But Krishna is Purusha Uttama. He is the supreme Purusha. And this chapter also explains 3 shloki. As we saw, the essence of Vedanta is explained. And culmination of knowledge. What is the culmination of knowledge? Which is surrender. That is also very clearly explained in this chapter. And the lessons for the overall chapter 15 is then how detachment alone is insufficient. We are speaking about Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yogis usually emphasis on detachment. But this chapter clarifies our detachment, vairagya alone is insufficient. It must be linked with surrender to the Supreme Person. In itself, detachment is not the goal in itself. is not a standalone goal. Rather, it is to ultimately surrender to the Supreme Person. And true knowledge is not ritualism or just knowing the Vedic scriptures and doing yag and reciting all these shuktas and all these verses, but knowing the whole tree of material existence, and not just knowing, but how to cut that tree of bondage. That is what is defined as true knowledge in this chapter. Because chapter 13, we saw so many categories. What is the soul? What is body? Who's the super soul? So just knowing that is not enough. What are we going to do? How are we going to apply? That is true knowledge. Everyday life itself becomes spiritual when seen as sustained by Krishna. The sections 12 to 15 that explains how Krishna is supporting the soul in all of its existence, and understanding the distinction between jiva, matter, and the Supreme Lord is also the main lesson from this chapter, and the conclusion that only bhakti to Krishna grants ultimate perfection. So all of these things we will see in chapter 15. So chapter 15 mainly deals with this tree of illusion. So we will spend some time in the first two verses so that the analogy becomes much clear. So the world is like a tree seen in the water. Very beautiful, but sometimes not so beautiful, but generally beautiful, but only a reflection. So the conditioned souls are chasing the shadow of this reflection, the shadow of this tree, and they miss the real tree. And that's why here Krishna uses this analogy of a beautiful tree that is reflected, which is the spiritual world. The beautiful tree is the spiritual world, but that is reflected on water. So there is no reality in that reflection. That is like the material world. That material existence is like moving apartments endlessly, birth after birth, yet never finding home. What Krishna is saying, like, you don't need to keep moving. You can find home in the spiritual world. That's why he uses this analogy. And we will see in the first 6 verses that what is this banyan tree and how to cut down this banyan tree. So the first verse speaks about the upside down tree of illusion. The second verse speaks about the branches, twigs, and the roots, secondary roots of this particular tree, and how this tree is unknowable, is very difficult to know. And cutting the sword of this tree, cutting down this tree with a sword of detachment. Now that we know this tree is illusory, how do we get out of it? And what is the qualifications for liberation? And where do we go after liberation? So all of this is discussed in these first 6 verses. The first 2 verses describes about the tree of illusion itself, the reflection, and third speaks about how difficult it is to know this and how do we actually cut down this tree of illusion. What is the qualifications in order to get liberated from this tree of illusion, and where do we go after liberation? That's all discussed in the first 6 verses. So at this point, if anything you want to share, because we will get into the actual verses and the purport. So far, I tried my best to give a connection to why chapter 15 is being discussed. What was the thing that in chapter 14 that led to this chapter 15? And we also tried to discuss briefly what is the subject matter of this chapter 15, what are the lessons, what are the special features. We discussed all that. So if you want to ask anything before we proceed, yes, because we will start reading the verses and the purport and discuss further. Yes, Purv.
When you said that detachment alone is insufficient and it must be linked with surrender to Krishna. But as you practice bhakti, and I'm just thinking how this detachment can be cultivated, because is it that the more we practice bhakti and the more we try to surrender ourselves to Krishna, then the detachment comes automatically, or do both of them go hand in hand, and do we have to practice both of them?
Principally speaking, one develops attachment to Krishna, naturally detachment from matter happens. However, while like beginning the practice of bhakti, we also take measures to reduce our attachments in this world that we already have, which are unhealthy, which stop us from establishing our full connection with Krishna. So they go hand in hand in the stage of practice. I choose and exercise my determination to not do things that are unhealthy for my connection with Krishna, and also exercise my determination to do more of the things that is helpful for relationship with Krishna. Does that make sense? So eventually, when there is full attachment to Krishna, there is full detachment manifested at that point. Until then, both has to be, we have to be very careful not to just in the name of devotees do any damn thing, and because I'm a devotee, I won't be affected. We cannot think like that. We have to choose what is favorable for my connection, and that is detachment. What is unfavorable for my detachment, I desist doing those things. So that is detachment, practically speaking.
Okay, thank you.
So if you have access to the book, so you can have it open. We are going to see through the translations of the first 6. So the whole section for first 6 verses is about cutting down the banyan tree of illusion, basically escaping the material illusion. And the verse 1, if you can go through the translations, you will see that how it describes the upside down tree of illusion, that the material world is compared to an inverted banyan tree with roots above and branches below. Its leaves are the Vedic hymns. And to know this tree is to grasp the essence of all the Veda. I'm just summarizing the translation. And the tree expands through the modes of material nature. And its branches are the species of life, its twigs are the sense objects. The secondary roots of a banyan tree, if you have ever seen a banyan tree, it has secondary roots hanging from the tree. And sometimes those roots would just go again to the ground and again make the tree very strong. That's why there are some huge banyan trees spanning across acres, because they have grown this secondary roots and they support the tree. The branches don't break. So those secondary roots we also have through in the form of whatever karma we accrue. We keep binding the soul in material existence. So then the third verse speaks about how the tree's beginning and end and foundation cannot be discerned in this material world. If we are just absorbed in the reflection of the tree, which is the material existence, if we are absorbed in it, it becomes impossible to know the beginning or the end or the foundation of this tree. You never look up and see, oh, the tree is there on the shore. That is why the reflection is on the water, because our focus is all completely on the reflection. We forget to see that there is a real tree and this is just a reflection. And that real tree is the spiritual existence, the spiritual world. Because it is so complex, it confuses the soul and makes it identify with the reflection of material existence. So now the question is, how to get free from this? Freedom comes by detachment, by decisively cutting this tree with detachment and surrendering to the Supreme Person. What are the qualifications? How can we actually cut down? So the liberation requires humility, freedom from illusion and lust, steadiness in spiritual practice, and detachment from dualities of happiness and distress in this world. Through all of these qualities, one can become qualified for liberation. And where do we go after liberation? The supreme abode beyond return. Krishna's spiritual abode is self-luminous, untouched by sun, moon, or fire. Krishna explains the nature of his spiritual world. Attaining it frees the soul forever from returning to material existence. So in this way, those 6 verses we will see that Krishna explains like life in this material world is compared to that reflection of the tree. Trees usually have roots down and branches up. But here Krishna will explain a tree in which the whole thing is upside down. The material world is an upside down situation of the spiritual world, meaning everything is like distorted, not how it should be. And this verse will show that how material world is a reflection and not the original reality. And the roots are above. The origin is beyond this world. Spiritual reality. Krishna is the origin of this tree. That's why the roots are above. Usually the crown should be above. But here in this tree, the roots are above because it's a reflection. And the roots are above. Above the reflection is the real tree, which is the spiritual world. The branches are like the different species of life that we are climbing through, higher and lower forms. And the leaves are the Vedic teachings and the Vedic rituals like karma kanda rituals, sacrifices, various practices that one engages in order to get material advancement through karma kanda process. And also the knowledge that nourishes this material existence, all kinds of leaves. There are twigs and fruits. That is the sense objects that we try to enjoy. And the fruits are the results of our actions. Sometimes the fruits are sweet, some fruits are sour, some fruits are rotten, some fruits are unripe, bitter. So pleasure, pain, success, failure, these are the fruits of this tree. And the living entity eats those fruits because of its attachment and suffers. And the secondary roots, the attachments that we develop to this world and the karmic reactions that keep us tied down, it creates more roots and that creates more. So it's a never ending tree, it never ends. So why is this tree a problem? Because it looks permanent, but it is temporary. It's too big and complex to trace its beginning or end. So the soul gets stuck moving from branch to branch, but from body to body, endlessly climbing, but never actually getting free from this continual birth and death. How do we get free? Not by climbing higher in the tree. Usually we are all taught in the corporate world, like you climb the ladder. The higher you climb, there is more freedom. But here, this tree, you don't get free by climbing higher or analyzing every branch of the tree, getting to explore everything. I need to know everything, see everything, experience everything before before I can understand what to do. No, you don't get free by just exploring every branch of this tree or by climbing higher in the tree. The only way is to cut the tree at its root using the sword of detachment and discernment. So detachment here surely not refers to anything empty, dry renunciation. It means letting go of false ownership and understanding the ownership of the Supreme. Where do we go? We seek the real tree now. We give up the reflection. So we have to seek the real tree, the eternal spiritual reality. And in order to reach that real tree, spiritual existence, one must surrender to the Supreme Person. And there in that world, the spiritual reality, it is self-luminous. There is no return to material bondage. So that is explained in verse 6. I'm giving an elaborate summary again of the first 6 verses because the trees concept could be confusing. So once we start, I'm going to go fast because I have told whatever I need to tell in the first 6 verses already multiple times under different pretext. So now when I actually start the verse, hopefully it should be more easier to go through. Connection with the chapter 14. Why is Krishna even explaining this particular chapter? Again, we are repeating that Krishna is clarifying the connection that he spoke in verses 26 and 27 of the chapter 14, that he said, if anyone who transcends the 3 modes becomes situated in the spiritual reality, in the Brahma Bhuta stage, achieves the state of Brahman realization. And then he says that he is the foundation of even that Brahman. So in this particular section, he is clarifying that. Arjuna and the readers may wonder, what does it mean that Krishna is the basis of Brahman? Isn't Brahman considered the ultimate by many philosophers? Is the Brahman not the ultimate reality? If Krishna is beyond Brahman, what is his nature? How is his nature different from the Brahman? What is his nature? So that will be explained in this. So the purpose of chapter 15 is to explain Krishna as the Supreme Person, who's higher and beyond both matter and the spirit, and beyond impersonal Brahman. So to show that the ultimate reality is personal, not impersonal, and to illustrate the entanglement of the soul in matter via the upside down tree and the need to cut that illusion to reach him. So these are the reasons for which the chapter 15 is being described. Finally, the first verse has a good amount of purport. So please refer to the book itself and let's go. Translation: the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. Krishna is not saying one who knows the leaves, the Vedic hymns is the knower of the Vedas. He is not saying that. One who knows the whole tree, Veda, Sa Veda with. He's not speaking anyone who understands those leaves and repeats those leaves, the Vedic hymns, is knower of Veda. No. Only when one who understands this whole tree, not just the reflection, but the whole tree, then that person is Vedavit. So, and Prabhupada clearly explains how the entanglement of this material world is compared to a banyan tree here. There is no end to this banyan tree. One wanders from one branch to another, endlessly, life after life. So the tree's roots grow upward because they begin from where? From the topmost planet, which is Brahmaloka. And beyond that is the spiritual reality. If one can understand this indestructible tree of illusion, Prabhupada says, then one can get out of it. Without understanding it, how can we get out? And Prabhupada also speaks that there is no ready experience in this world of a tree situated with its branches down and its roots upwards. We have never seen a tree like that. But he says, if you can actually find a tree beside a reservoir of water, we can see that the trees on the bank reflect upon the water with their branches up and branches down and roots up. So the tree of this material world is only a reflection of the real tree of the spiritual world. And what is the water in which this reflection is caused? Can anyone guess? It's there in the purport.
Is it material existence?
That is the reflection itself. But what is the water in which the tree is reflected?
Desire? I'm just
Yes.
sorry.
It's there in the purport very clearly. So thank you. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflected material light. Prabhupada is saying this reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire, just as a tree's reflection is situated on water. So if we can actually change our desire, then we will be able to change where we are living, whether in the reflection or in the real tree. One who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. And that's why everything is being described in detail here. And eventually Prabhupada says, one who is attracted by the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas is attracted by the beautiful green leaves of the tree. He does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas, as disclosed by the personality of God himself, is to cut down this reflected tree and attain the real tree of the spiritual world. That is the whole purpose. You see my screen?
5.15.1, yes.
Okay. Sorry, I lost my screen. Yes, I'm able to see. So the world is compared to an imperishable banyan tree with roots up and branches down. And its leaves are the Vedic hymns. And knowing this tree fully means only then one is a true knower of the Vedas, not just learning to recite some verses. So material existence is like a reflection, upside down, temporary and entangling. Just studying the Vedas is not enough. One must grasp the whole purpose of the Vedas. And in the purport, Prabhupada does highlight that the banyan tree is like the endless cycle of fruitive activity, especially the reflection. The tree is only a reflection of the spiritual reality. And the purpose of the Vedas is to help us cut off attachment to this false tree and attain the real tree of spiritual existence. To know the Vedas is not to count the leaves, but to find the root. That is the conclusion of this particular verse. It's not getting stuck with the rituals or with the hymns and all the different kinds of pujas. Navratri is going on and so many people are dancing in Garba. All the Indians are busy dancing during the 9 days. They're all dancing dolls in the hands of Maya actually. So there is nothing inherently spiritual about just going and dancing and considering that as religiosity or spirituality. That's a sad state of India, that they take out the spiritual element in everything and retain the community and fun aspect and assume that's all is to their religion. So it's quite a sad state. Wherever you go, everybody is very excited about, oh, I was there. When you speak about engaging in spiritual practice, people say, yeah, I went to Garba and like danced and I went, did this. So they seriously consider that as a spiritual practice. There may be some element of prayer involved, but spiritual practice is not just like going around and praying for material welfare. And so that is why when we read these verses, it may seem like, maybe it's not that hard. Maybe that's not that difficult to understand these things. Please just step outside. because now we have the mercy of Prabhupada, we know this knowledge, so we may think, oh, it's just so normal. Why not? Why is it so difficult? It's easy. Now I understand these things. However, even for us to actually apply it, practice it, and to achieve the full result of it is hard. What to speak of so many people, thousands and millions, billions of living entities. Even the 1 point some billions of Indians who claim to be born in the land of Dharma, how many people really understand the purpose of the religion, be able to practice? So to know the Vedas is not just to count the leaves and be stuck in the ritualistic aspects of it, but to find the root of the tree. And leaves of the Vedas are not the goal. Their purpose is to guide us to the root, Krishna. So there is a purpose for which the Vedic literature is written. It's not to just memorize them and repeat them. The purpose is to guide us towards the root, which is connection with Krishna. So the whole world is busy chasing the reflection of the spiritual reality on the water of desire. So we are all just chasing the reflection most part of our life without knowing that it is reflection, despite knowing that it is reflection sometimes. Constantly chasing the reflection. And then we say, hey, why am I not happy? Why am I not fulfilled? Why do I feel like very lonely, cut off, dry? There is a void in my heart. How do I fill this vacuum? Despite practicing bhakti, why am I not feeling the bliss? Because we are chasing the reflection knowingly and unknowingly. So life in this world is like running after a tree's reflection in water. Looks real, feels great, beautiful, but slips away when you try to grab it. So the moon is reflected on the water, and if you want to just go catch the moon, so it will slip away because it is just a reflection, because the real moon, it's not that reality. So similarly, we constantly try to become happy by trying to grab on to the material reality, and it surely slips from our hands. There is nobody in this world in all these millions of years that have ever become successful against the material nature. Huge emperors, huge empires, great kings, generals, political analysts, ministers, philosophers, philanthropists, strategists, all kind economists, all kinds of people have come and gone from in this phase of on this phase of earth. Nobody could ever actually grab onto this false reality. So that's why this section is saying that how do we stop chasing that reflection? And the second verse is explaining the branches and the twigs and the secondary roots of this particular tree. So the branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the three modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruit of actions of the human society. So this whole description of the banyan tree is here being explained, that the tree spreads upward and downward, nourished by the three modes. Within the reflection also, it's going in multiple directions. Some higher planetary systems, some lower planetary systems. Within that reflection itself, you will see some branches are going upward, some branches are going downward. So twigs are the sense objects, because twigs are very attractive, very beautiful. We all go around, especially in the Western countries, it's a thing when spring comes and the colors change. So everybody is interested to go see the change of colors, the new sprig of new leaves coming, and it has a different colors, and the fall season of course is there. But here mainly the spring also, a lot of people go around, watch the colors of the leaves, the new leaves budding, pale yellowish green. So we in India we celebrate it as Vasant, and here in the West they observe it as going around seeing the spring in bloom. So twigs are very attractive. That's why it is compared to the sense objects. We are attracted to all the sense objects of, what do you call, forms, sounds, smells, objects of for the touch sensation and taste. So these are all the sense objects we are behind, and the tips, the senses itself. So the secondary roots are the karma, which produces both piety or impiety, which gives rise to pious reactions or impious reactions. So different beings and experiences grow based on which mode predominates. Mode of goodness, mode of ignorance, mode of passion. Accordingly, a person traverses this tree of reflection. Mode of goodness will be in an upward direction, mode of ignorance would be in a downward direction. So the senses and the sense objects extend the entanglement, make it more attractive, makes the tree irresistible. And karma roots us deeper into this existence through the secondary roots. And that's all explained in the purport also, how higher and lower species or the higher and lower branches, senses grow like twigs reaching for objects. Attachments and aversions bind us like the secondary roots, keeping us circling in human society or even lower. The subsidiary roots are attachments and aversions, which are the byproducts of different varieties of suffering and sense enjoyment, as Prabhupada writes in the purport. He also writes, after enjoys the results of virtuous activities in the upper planetary systems, he comes down to earth and renews his karma or fruit of activities for promotion. So this planet of human beings is considered the field of activities. So in this way, a person goes up and down. So the tendencies toward piety and impiety are considered to develop from these secondary roots. Whatever karma we have done, sometimes we are born with a certain level of attachment to piety or to impiety. That's because of our past choices, how strong they were. Yesterday I was giving a talk and there was this small boy, like he was young, like not more than like 10 or 11 years old. Any question I was asking, he was the first one to answer, and he answered deeply. He was very philosophical. He was very sober. It's quite, quite surprising to see someone of age 10 or 11 just gets it, knows it, and answers very clearly, and not just like random. It could be ones you can just say randomly, but like really gets it. And I was just teaching the chapter 5 and 6 in my community group of the Bhagavad Gita. There we were speaking about how in the chapter 6, Krishna is saying that anyone who has not completed their spiritual practice, but endeavored sincerely, it will continue in the next life. Especially a verse, they say that perfection will search and come to them even without their endeavoring to go behind the spiritual principles or practice. So looking at the boy, I was just thinking, okay, it's previous life. It's no way that a 10-year-old really just reads all of the books and gets it. It's not possible. So based on our actions, we would have attachment to piety or impiety by default because of our past lives, actions, and actions in this life. So the web of distractions is what is this tree is being described as in this verse. It's just a tree of distraction. It's a web of distractions. It keeps us stuck. Our senses are like the branches and stretching toward their objects. And karma keeps planting new secondary roots. In this way, the more we chase, the deeper we get stuck. We jump from branch to branch. We become attracted to the twigs of the branches. So we go from end to end, traversing in this branch, and then we look up and see, oh, that branch is having a better twig. So let me go there. So in this way, we just keep going towards various sense objects, jumping from one branch to one branch, and just getting deeper and deeper stuck in this tree. So the modes and the senses keep feeding the illusion of the conditioned soul. They keep feeding it and keep continuing the material existence. And the third and the fourth verse, let's just take another 10 minutes. We will be able to complete this section. So the translation, the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down the strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So Prabhupada is speaking about that how do we get detached from this tree, because this tree is so big, so entangling, that it's very difficult to find where is the beginning of this tree, where is it extending from, where it is leading us to. It's impossible. So that's why he's saying this tree is not to be climbed. This tree is supposed to be, we're supposed to get down from the tree and cut down its roots. So the tree's real form is unknowable in this world. We cannot understand what is the nature of spiritual existence sitting here and philosophizing about it alone. We have to really get there to fully understand the nature of the spiritual reality. And this material reality is means beginningless. So when you say beginningless, that it means it has no end also. Because even if individual souls, some of them escape from the tree, it does not mean the material existence ceases to exist. It continues because there will be other souls who are still stuck to it, feeding into their illusions. The only way out of this tree is to cut it with detachment and seek the eternal root, the Supreme Person. And Prabhupada says, analysis alone won't reveal the tree's origin. The realization comes by detachment and surrender. That is the goal of especially the verse 4 is speaking about it. The goal is reaching the eternal abode where one never returns. And that's what will be discussed in 6th verse also. The tree is too complex to trace. Only with spiritual association with the devotees can one become aware of its real cause. And through proper sangha, then asanga happens. So when there is sadhu sangha, there is asanga. So the asanga also happens. Detachment from things that are unhealthy also happens naturally when we increase the association with the devotees. And that is the weapon. The detachment is the weapon with which this root could be cut down. Surrendering to Krishna is the only way to reach the eternal reality. So these are some of the highlights from the purport. Prabhupada says one has to search out the origin of this tree, the Supreme Personality of God. Then the first thing one must do is surrender to Him. So the whole idea is stop climbing the wrong ladder. So success in this world is like climbing a ladder, leaning on the wrong wall. So real freedom comes not by knowing this tree alone or by climbing this tree higher and higher. Rather, it's when you cut off the illusions and connect to the Supreme. So the tree of material life cannot be mapped or mastered. You can have Google Maps, you can have Apple Maps, which is very horrible. So you can have all these kind of maps which can map this material existence, but that is not the real mapping. The tree of material life cannot be mapped. You cannot know its beginning, its existence, its vastness in a real sense. We may have some understanding of that small speck of a dust, which is the Earth planet, which is floating in the space. We hardly have any idea. Like sometimes you read these new theories that are being published in news channels as scientists came up with a breakthrough. They have found this, they have found that. And the title would be very emphatic. Scientists find this and finally answer this question. And then when you click in and see everything is maybe, could be, this, that, there is nothing substantial there. It sounds like children's story. They are assuming, they're thinking, the scientists are like theorizing that this could be the reason, that could be the reason. Everything is, in Hindi they call it, it's all built on thin air. Like nothing is concrete. It's all built, it's all just stories. It's their assumption to some extent. They may be closer to reality in some way, but not at all, like they miss the point. So the tree of material existence cannot be mapped. Forget about even mastering it. You can't even map it, what to speak of mastering it. So it's just our illusion to think that, oh, we have any control or understanding of this material existence, because we are trying to see through our eyes, and all that we see is going to bewilder us more. That's all. So the real tree cannot be, actually, the tree of material life cannot be mapped or mastered. We just get stuck the more we try. The freedom begins by cutting illusion and surrendering to the root. So the last two verses, that verse 5 of this chapter speaks about those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. So it's a nice purport. Prabhupada speaks about the surrendering process. He says the first qualification is that one is not deluded by pride. We are so proud of our material accomplishments and we are very puffed up. So the conditioned soul thinks itself as the lord of the material nature. So in that condition, it is very difficult for the conditioned soul to surrender to the Supreme Lord, because the soul thinks that it is great, has no trace of doubt that it's actually stupid and stuck in the material illusion. So that is the way the world has captured us and keeping us in imprisonment, because we are great. Everyone in the world thinks they are great. They are here to do great things. They want to one up others, wants to prove themselves better than others. So in this way, because of this being puffed up, the conditioned soul is busy trying to make it better and big in this material world. So because of this, what happens? The soul is stuck. There is no way it can actually see the reality or surrender to the Supreme Lord. So one should know by cultivation of real knowledge that he is not the Lord of the material nature. The actual Supreme, the Lord is the Supreme person. So when one is free from that delusion caused by pride, which is the foundation, then the process of surrender can begin. Without dismantling that delusion caused by pride, it's hard to begin the process of surrender. So one who's always expecting some honor in the material world, it's very difficult to surrender to the Supreme Person. So pride is due to illusion, and because of that, surrender does not happen. So Prabhupada writes, pride is due to illusion, for although one comes here, stays for a brief time, and then goes away, he has the foolish notion that he is the Lord of the world. He thus makes all things complicated, and he is always in trouble. The whole world moves under this impression. People are considering the land, this earth, to belong to human society, and they have divided the land under the false impression that they are proprietors. One has to get out of this false notion that human society is the proprietor of this world. When one is freed from such a false notion, he becomes free from all the false associations caused by familial, social, and national affections. These faulty associations bind one to this material world. After this stage, one has to develop spiritual knowledge. One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. And when one has an understanding of things as they are, he becomes free from all dual conceptions such as happiness and distress, pleasure and pain. He becomes full in knowledge. Then it is possible for him to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the highlights are that the freedom from pride, illusion, false association, lust, and dualities, through that one can steadily develop spiritual vision leading to the surrender to the Supreme Lord. The road to liberation starts with humility and detachment from false ownership. Only then can one fully surrender. And the highlights of the purport is basically pride and illusion block surrender. False associations of family, society, and nation bind us. Means I'm not speaking about having a family, more of seeing them as through a illusory concept. Knowledge frees us from dualities and opens the way to bhakti. Of course, bhakti is not dependent on knowledge. It actually plants a doubt. But usually you come in association with devotees, then naturally, even if we don't have any knowledge, by the association of devotees, we develop the knowledge. The first qualification is that one should not be deluded by pride. When one is free from delusion caused by pride, then he can begin the process of surrender. This is what Prabhupada is concluding, that we are supposed to travel light. But I just came in a flight. I was just looking around and seeing that how much people can carry. It's not that I had anything less. I had 2 bags. So I was thinking about myself as well as others, that how much we have to carry around. And of course, I also saw a couple having a small child, and they had so much because they had to take care of the child. Like, you never know what the child will ask, what the child will cry about. So the mom was having a complete bag separately just for the child. So how much pain it is that we take in order to actually grow other people, take care of a child, take care of family. So there is nothing wrong in that endeavor. That sacrifice is needed. And I was seeing that standing, and the couple there, both the husband and wife, they were engaging with the child. They were smiling. They're making fun, and the child was so happy. It's a small child, and they were like making faces. They were hiding. So they're just constantly like playing and making the child so happy. I was thinking how much the child is receiving this emotional affection and support, and it's going to help the child actually grow into a better person through that affection and attention that it is receiving from the parents. However, there is another level. There is a completely different viewpoint to this whole thing, that how We just, without spiritual knowledge, that very things which is sweet and nice can also bind. So a matured person is one who can traverse between those two realities regularly, see life from a bigger perspective, and do the needful on a daily basis, however, not getting lost. How do we? Because you can't just say, oh, everything is illusion, so the mom does not take care of the baby or does not give emotional affection and attention. Then the society would become people who pick up guns and go around and shoot. The research shows that any shooter, like the mass shooting, the shooters, usually those people lacked affection growing up. They had hatred towards the society because they did not receive proper attention and affection. So that lack of that affection turns into anger. And eventually, when you put hands in those people's hands, so guns in those people's hands, then they go around and shoot. I'm in Texas. So there is every now and then there is a shooting in Texas. It's so common. So many times it has happened in Dallas, in schools. So just coming into the cities, and when I hear news, oh, there's shooting here, there, and here, and I'm right now in the city. So it just hits very differently. So on one hand, if we just reject these things immaturely, saying, oh, this is all bodily attachment, that leads to more confusion, more problems. At the same time, just doing, and then I was there in yesterday in a program where there were like so many Indian families, the children, they're taken care nicely, they're given everything. But if it is done without spiritual knowledge, that also causes problem. So the question is not whether do I do my responsibility or not. We have to do our responsibilities, but with what consciousness? That's what is being said. So travel light means not just not possessing things, not being possessed by things. We think we are carrying luggage, we become a luggage. We become possessed by all these pride, anger, illusion. We are the carry on baggage for these six anarthas. So they just completely pack us and ship us from lifetime to lifetime. So we are the luggage, we are the shipment in the hands of the six anarthas if we are not careful. So traveling light means we reduce these attachments as much as possible gradually. And through the practice of bhakti, we become more pure. Pride, ego, and attachments are like the heavy baggage. Only when we drop them can we actually board the flight to the eternal world. Of course, you can carry these attachments as check-in luggage. You check in and then you come back in your destination, you pick them back. No, these things don't come to the spiritual reality. So we shed them. It's like going through the security screening. You can't carry them. You leave them behind. Only then you're allowed to actually go. So pride and attachment block the path. Now, humility opens it. So the last verse, that this verse speaks about, okay, now that I escape the material reality, where do I go? What is the nature of the spiritual reality? That supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. So in this part, Prabhupada says that how the spiritual world, which is known as Krishna Loka or Goloka Vrindavan, is being described in this verse. In the spiritual sky, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine. I don't know. Suddenly, I'm just remembering. I think there is a song like "You're My Sunshine" or "Moonshine," something like that. And nothing is required in the spiritual world. So Krishna is the sunshine. Krishna is the moonshine. So everything is illumined by, because everything is spiritual, everything is self-illumined. In the spiritual sky, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, fire, or electricity because all the planets are self-luminous. We have only one planet in this universe, the sun, which is self-luminous, but all the planets in the spiritual sky are self-luminous. The shining effulgence of all those planets called Vaikunthas constitutes the shining sky known as the Brahma Jyoti. The light that's coming from all these planets is also the Brahma Jyoti. Actually, the effulgence is emanating from the planet of Krishna. Part of that shining effulgence is covered by the Mahat Tattva. Of course, Prabhupada is speaking about how the material world is dark, but the spiritual world is bright. So Krishna's abode needs no sun, no moon, or fire to lit. It's self-lit. Those who reach it never return. The spiritual world is self-luminous, eternal, and free of the darkness of material existence. The contrast is material world is dark. If the sun does not rise, there is nothing. With all the ability of our eyes, we cannot see even our own hands. Once reached the spiritual destination, the soul never falls again. It just opens a cans of water, and I'm not going to open it. So the purport highlights this. Goloka Vrindavan is the supreme planet. All Vaikunthas are self-luminous. Prabhupada speaks about the Brahma Jyoti comes from Krishna's abode, and only devotional service can grant entry into the spiritual abode. Prabhupada says this supreme abode can be achieved only by surrender and by no other means. It's the last word of the purport. The supreme abode can be achieved only by surrender and by no other means. So it's the home beyond the grid. We all want to go off the grid, right? It's such a famous thing. We want to live off the grid. So, but here Krishna is saying you can really live off the grid when you actually get out of the material world. Until temporary homes powered by electricity, unlike temporary homes powered by electricity, even if you did not have any electricity, still this world is on a grid in terms of sun and moon. It's borrowed. It's artificial in a sense. So Krishna's world shines on its own. So once we arrive there in the spiritual world, we never again have to move, because we constantly move from one home to another. So that whole process will be stopped. That moving homes also can be like reincarnating. That reincarnation is stopped. We're just situated in the spiritual reality. I'm so sorry. Are you able to see my screen? Did you see the verse 6?
Yes,
Okay.
Prabhuji, we can
Okay.
see.
So this is the home beyond the grid. So going to the spiritual world is literally going off the grid in a real sense. So the supreme abode is self-luminous and final. There is no return. So you can't escape the tree by climbing higher. You have to cut it. That's the whole point in this particular section. And the true liberation is not more success within the system, but detachment from illusion and reconnection with the root, Krishna. So that's the final thing. And the lessons we can see from this section is that the world is a reflection. It's not real. It appears real, but it's not the reality. And climbing higher in illusion is not progress. Rather, like waking up from that dream of illusion and cutting down the tree of illusion is the goal. Freedom comes through detachment and surrender to the Supreme Lord. And life here in the material world is a reflection. It's not the reality. And we can reflect, like, what are the branches of distraction in my life that keeps me busy but not fulfilled? What are the objects of distraction I hold on to, which keeps me distracted, busy, but never fulfilled, leaves me wanting for more? So what are those? How can I actually reduce that? And this is a quote from Bruce Lee. It is not a daily increase, but a daily decrease. Hack away at the unessential, because we speak of increasing the sadhana, which is right, because which is a natural byproduct of daily decrease of distractions. So focus not just on the increasing of the things, but also decreasing what is unessential. Hack away the unessential, then naturally you will get more time to increase. And of course, if you focus on the increase alone, I do sometimes disagree with Bruce Lee, respectfully. I know he cannot hit me, so I can like safely disagree, because it's not about not a daily increase. He is saying on a certain angle it is right, but in bhakti we increase our attachment to Krishna, we increase our activities of Krishna, and naturally it leads to decreasing in the things of that we don't need. But however, we also have to consciously take account of our heart and see what are my attachments and how can I actually hack at it. So the final slide, that the purpose of the Vedas, as disclosed by the personality of Godhead himself, is to cut down this reflected tree and attain the real tree of the spiritual world.